It's important to find the truth about who murdered the president because there was an official governmental investigation. And it seems to me, as one humble American, very proud of being an American, that when the government investigates who assassinated our precious president, that we find out. And at the very least, if we can't find out, we tell the American people what we did find out during the course of the investigation and the reasons why we weren't able to find out exactly what happened. And that should have been done, and it wasn't done.
Right after we left the safe house, then we came down and was dropped off on the other side of the triple underpass. And we checked back over this way. We'd spotted the grassy knoll on the north side.
I don't know if we will ever know how many shooters there were. My investigation shows that Johnny Roselli was there, Chuck Nicoletti was there, James Fowles was there.
I'm fixing to lose my fuel of fire. And at this point, either I shoot or I can put it in a suitcase and leave, one or the other. I took the shot. I fired one shot only.
Joseph Patrick Kennedy taught his kids that they could get away with anything. And no matter what, they could always get away with it. And therefore, we have drug addiction in some of the Kennedy kids. Well, we can get away with it. We'll solve everything. But in Bobby Kennedy, many, many instances where he thought he could get away with anything. And John Kennedy, believing that he could have intercourse with any woman in the world and get away with it. And so I think there was absolutely one feeling amongst the entire Kennedy clan that whatever we want to do, we can do, and we will get away with it. I think this was the Kennedy attitude. And if Bobby were really smart, he would have known, and I'm sure he did know, the promise that his father made to the mob. If he were really smart, he wouldn't go after the mob the way he did. But it was very selfish on his part. He was going to make his name to get rid of the mob. And of course, it is said that Bobby Kennedy did realize that he, in an interesting way, was the reason his brother got killed.
Basically, Joe Kennedy promised the mob the White House. You elect my son, and the White House is yours. Well, what did? They thought they elected his son because Illinois is the one that flipped it in West Virginia. Well, who flipped it in Illinois? None other but Chicago. And they felt like they got Kennedy elected. So when Bobby steps in, they felt betrayed.
In the spring and summer of 1963, according to credible federal witnesses, 3 major mafia figures were all discussing plots to kill John and Robert Kennedy, John or Robert. Carlos Marcello, mafia boss of New Orleans, spoke about killing President Kennedy. Santos Traficante, mafia boss of Tampa, predicted that Kennedy would be killed. And Jimmy Hoffa, who was the Teamster boss, who was close with both Traficante and Marcello, is asking an FBI informant to procure some explosives to murder Robert Kennedy.
The mafia stood to lose millions after Castro kicked them out of Cuba and ended what could be called Cuba's role as a client state for the mob.
Prior to November 22nd, 1963, the mob were in bed with CIA. Years before, they connected through a guy by the name of Robert Mayhew, who was a retired FBI agent, that put the Chicago mob together with the CIA and came up with the operation to kill Castro. CIA, unchecked, no checks and balances on them, basically ran their own ship, didn't answer to anybody, and Kennedy at that time was about to disband them. He wasn't happy with the Bay of Pigs. He wasn't happy with all the operations they had going to kill Castro. He was rather embarrassed by some of the operations they had going. He fired Dulles, and he fired General Cabell, and strangely enough, the mayor of Dallas, Texas, is General Cabell's brother.
Kennedy also was having second thoughts on our involvement in Vietnam. Soon after taking office, he'd been confronted with a crisis in the Southeast Asian nation of Laos, where the communist Pathet Lao were fighting against the CIA-supported General Phumi Novasan. As in the Bay of Pigs invasion, all of Kennedy's advisors, including the Joint Chiefs of Staff, urged him to send in U.S. troops. But again, he declined.
So you have the military against him. Johnson and Kennedy hated each other.
Just prior to his death, Kennedy signed National Security Action Memorandum 263, which effectively called for the return of all U.S. troops from Vietnam by the end of 1965. Kennedy's disengagement orders were countermanded only days after his assassination by the security memorandum authorized by his successor, Lyndon Johnson. The initial draft of this order was dated November 21st, 1963, a time when Kennedy was in Texas and the day before he arrived in Dallas.
Not only are you looking at things getting tight for CIA, you're looking at things getting tight for the Mafia, you're looking at Bobby Kennedy going after him.
And then we have the Bay of Pigs. The Bay of Pigs, of course, it was a disaster, and it was a disaster thanks to John Kennedy, who in 1:30 on April the 16th in 1961 had okayed the flight of airplanes out of Nicaragua to take care of this Bay of Pigs invasion. And then at 9:30 that night had rescinded it. And so what happened was that about 1,250 anti-Castro soldiers got captured, about 125 of them got killed.
So who did it? Well, I can throw another one in. He's going to get rid of J. Edgar Hoover if he is reelected in 1964, and Hoover knows that. He's mandatory retirement time. What does Johnson do after he gets in the White House but give him a permanent deferment to the day he dies? They can be director if he lives to be 150. So you got all these people that don't like Kennedy.
J. Edgar Hoover hated the Kennedys, and the Kennedys hated him. Bobby was over him, and one Saturday afternoon, Bobby asked J. Edgar Hoover to look after his dog. And so you can imagine what J. Edgar Hoover thought about that.
You know, you talk about conspiracy, you talk about how could it last for 40 years without somebody in the conspiracy saying anything.
Former Special Agent Zach Sheldon was an agent who worked under my supervision. He had called me and presented to me the stage of the investigation on the Kennedy assassination that he had been conducting independently. It was quite obvious from our conversation that Zach had the investigators fire for the investigation, which to a certain degree concerned me. And I wanted Zach, and I told him at this time, to kind of step back and don't let your emotions run, but hold yourself as the investigator and let the information, facts flow.
I entered on duty with the FBI in 1970 and became an agent in 1973, where I went to Kansas City, Missouri, then Chicago, Illinois, and then the Houston Division. When I was in Kansas City and Chicago, my main investigative duties was on the Organized Crime Squad. Since retiring in 1998 from the FBI, I have spent a lot of time investigating the Kennedy assassination.
Why do we want to open up this sore again? Has there not been enough, Zach, facts, warrant commission, books written, documentaries written? What makes your information so different and unique than what has previously been presented? We then decided at this time that Zach must convince me as the old supervisor, that there was sufficient information here where I would authorize an investigation, meaning predication, a purpose. Why spend the effort? I've had an occasion to now review the evidence that has been gathered by Zach. We'd already crossed the threshold of predication, reason to investigate. After reviewing the evidence and information, in my opinion, it has reached the point which I would call probable cause. We have got to go over that information, realize that maybe certain mistakes were made. Maybe there were certain agendas that had to be taken care of for national security. Well, now is the time for truth to come forward.
In approximately 1979 or 1980 in Chicago, I had an investigation involving James Files. In this investigation, I identified the fact that Files was hijacking tractor-trailer loads of merchandise and bringing them to Chicago and selling them. We were able to purchase 3 of these loads, and with conversation that we had with Files, it was known that he was definitely a, say, not a godchild, but basically a really running buddy of Chuck Nicoletti's. Also at that same time, Files was involved in a chop shop operation and was bringing these vehicles down to Dallas, Texas. Through this investigation, I was able to come very close to an individual that Files knew, and this individual told me that once in Dallas, Texas, they went through Daley Plaza. Files became very weird, made a comment to the effect that if the American people really knew what happened, no one would be able to handle it. This statement, I felt, was definitely made, or this individual wouldn't have told me this. The question then was, why did Files make that statement?
Joe West is a private investigator whose investigation of the Kennedy assassination began in 1989. In 1992, he meets former FBI Special Agent Zach Shelton.
I told Joe West about this comment that Files had made in 1979 and told him if he really wanted to check up on a good lead, he should find Files. And at that time, I knew Files was incarcerated somewhere in the United States.
Initially, Files was very reluctant to talk to Joe West. Meticulously, West established a relationship with Files. Through months of personal visits and detailed correspondence, Files began to reveal his participation in the JFK assassination, but would only confess if he were granted immunity from prosecution. West was negotiating immunity from Texan authorities when he became ill and suddenly passed away in 1993. As Files had come to respect Joe West, his death was a major factor in his willingness to come forward with the confession that West had been seeking from him.
When Joe West first originally contacted me here at Stateville Prison, I was on a visit. The counselor came in the visiting room where I was at and stated that she wanted me to come out and make a phone call. I told her, I said, no way, I'm here 365 days a year. I'm not leaving my visit to go make a phone call. I said, who's calling? She told me, someone from Texas named Joe West. I told him, I do not know the party. I said, tell them I'll call them on my time, not their time. I'm on a visit. Don't bother me when I'm on a visit. The next day, they got me out of my cell. They took me downstairs and got a phone call hooked up. I called Joe West to talk to him. I told him, you have 3 minutes to convince me why I should talk to you. As Joe started talking to me, I told him, I said, whoa, stop. I said, you're on a lot of touchy spots. I said, these phone calls are recorded. Every phone call going in and coming out is recorded. If you want to talk to me that bad, then I suggest you come and visit me. Joe West had me put him on his visiting list. He come up to visit me. He spent 2 days up here talking with me. The first day, I wouldn't even talk to him about the Kennedy situation. We got into sports, weather, generally about prison, local things till I got comfortable with him. The next day, after I thought it over all night, Joe West seemed like a pretty nice guy. I really liked Joe. He had a magnetism about him. The next day, we sat down, we got serious, and then we started talking. I sit in the dining or in the visiting room with Joe. They gave us a pencil and paper. I sketched the entire Daley Plaza out for him without any maps, without any pictures, nothing present. And I explained to Joe at that time, because Joe wanted to know where was I at. And I said, I'm going to put an X on the paper to signify me, but this X is not in the correct spot. I said, when the time comes, then I will put the X where it is supposed to be. And he said that someone had informed him that I was there. He said he had a reliable source. And I didn't know for quite a while who that source was. It was quite some time later before I learned the fact that the FBI was aware of my presence as early as 1964. Because I never knew that anyone ever knew about me. But Zach Sheldon, from what I understand, and I'm only quoting this from hearsay, that Zach was the one that stated and gave me to Joe West the information on me, that I was in Dealey Plaza. Well, the whole thing is, like with Joe West died. He passed away never knowing that I was one of two shooters there in Dealey Plaza that day. Joe West never knew I was on the grassy knoll. Joe West went in for heart surgery, and from what I was told and what I understood, that he had come through it fairly well and he was on the road to recovery. But then I was informed there was complications with his medicine. He was allergic to it, or an allergy or something. He saw that it killed him, the medication killed him. Joe West had the case in court. He wanted to exhume John F. Kennedy's body. And that's what he was fighting for. And at this point, when I talked to Joe West, I explained to him that John F. Kennedy had been hit in the head with a mercury round, a special load. At this point, I explained to him he can use this in the courts to have the body exhumed, because there would still be traces of mercury, because the traces of mercury do not disappear. They'll always be there. And so this is what Joe West wanted, to go back with more evidence and use this to get Kennedy's body exhumed, to look for traces of mercury.
And the court had accepted his case.
The court had accepted his case. But with his death, the case died.
Go back to when you first learned that there was a plot to kill Kennedy, and then just bring us forward into how it all came about.
Excuse me. The first time that I knew about anything being planned on Kennedy, I'd heard a lot of rumors that nobody liked Kennedy. They wanted to kill Kennedy. They wanted to assassinate him. They wanted to do everything to the man.
Were you kind of upset with him yourself over Bay of
Oh, I
Pigs?
was upset with him over the Bay of Pigs, but I never paid any attention to any of this at first, because, you know, everybody talks. Somebody gets mad at somebody right away, and I'm going to take this guy out. I'm going to take that person out. Woo, 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 woo. You know, a lot of barking, junkyard dogs barking, you know. But I was sitting in the Harlow Grill that evening playing the pinball machine, not the flipper kind, the kind with numbers where you gamble on and you put about $10 in to play a game. And Charles Nicoletti walked in, a man that I did a lot of work with, a man that I respected. And he walked in the back room where I was at, says, "Jimmy, let's go." I said, "I'll be with you in a minute." He reached over and tilted the machine and said, "Let's go now." My reply was, "Yes, sir, Mr. Nicoletti." I knew he wasn't in no mood to wait and hang around. He said, "I want to talk to you." I went out, I got in this car, and we went for a ride. And we made it a basic habit not to sit around restaurants, talk, reels, discuss anything like that, because when other people hearing. And we went for a ride, and he told me, he says, "We're going to do a friend of yours." And I said, "Jesus, what the hell did he do now?" But I thought this was referring to one of my friends in town there. He had been robbing the pinball machines and the cigarette machines, and he had a $1,000 a day heroin habit. And he was an all-out and out junkie, and, you know, they'd beat him up several times and everything else and threatened him, but so far they'd never went as far as to kill him. Chuck laughed at me, and he says, "No," he says, "not him." He says, "I'm talking about President Kennedy, JFK. And I looked at him and I said, "What?" He says, "JFK. He says, "Your buddy." I said, "Well, he just busting, you know, giving me a hard time, but he knew JFK. He knew how much I disliked the man." As I looked at him and I laughed. I said, "Okay, fine with me. You get in arguments there." And at this point, I still kind of thought, you know, he was just joking with me. But then he got real serious about it. And then we started talking, and he told me, he says, "What I'm going to want you to do," he says, "I'm going to look around." He says, "We'll search the area around the town here." He says, "You know everything pretty good." He says, "And see where we're going to do it at, what kind of weapons we're going to need, and other things like that." He says. And he mentioned, he said he was going to bring Johnny Roselli in on it. Fine with me, and I don't care who we work with. You know, I like Johnny. I had no problems with him. And originally we'd planned to do it in the Chicago area, but certain people didn't like that idea. So then we put it off, and this is like 6 months before the assassination ever really took place.
But you were not supposed to be a shooter?
Oh, no, never. I was not a shooter. I was, let's put it this way. I would like, to go for, I go for this, go for that, pick this up, pick that up, run around, drive him around. When Chuck went somewhere, I was always with him. And
did you ever get wind that the Secret Service might have found out about the plot in Chicago?
No, I didn't get no wind on that at all, no drift. I just knew that certain people high up in organized crime, they wasn't too happy about the idea of having something like that happen to that magnitude in their backyard.
Gotcha.
Because they figured Bobby would really be down there, and they already had their own little private wars going. And so we decided, well, we'd take it moving. So I had no idea it was going to Texas at that point.
About when was that?
Well, I'm going to say probably 2.5, 3 months maybe before I ever made the trip to Texas that they were talking about it. Because they didn't know where he was going to go. They were looking for an area to go. But then they had heard that he possibly may take this trip to Texas, but there was nothing definite. And I didn't go to Texas until that had been confirmed. And they had several different locations. There was New Orleans, and I don't know, there's other places he was going to. But when it come down to it, I had been told there was places that they had planned to do it. Other people had been authorized, stuff like that. Just different rumors you hear. How much credibility is to it, I cannot say. But when the time come, and we knew that it was going to be serious, and we were going to, Chuck was sending me to Texas, that's when I went down on Belmont Avenue, the old Valley place where they made the pinball machines. And I had a shed down there, place where we, back room, that was all owned by the outfit too, pinball machines. I kept a catch of weapons down there. We used to do a lot of work on. When I say we, I'm referring to a party named Wolfman, who is now deceased. But at that time, he was excellent, remodifying weapons, manufacturing loads, whatever come down to handguns, rifles. This guy was a professional at it. He could manufacture things in his basement like you wouldn't believe, from silencers on down the line. He did it all for him. So I went down there, got the stuff we needed, and we had the one car that he just bought, already had everything secured in. We had secret compartments in it. And every car that we had, even before the 63 Chevy, even in the 61 Ford that we had prior to that in the 62, we had compartments in the dash where you could reach up under it, open things up, put grenades in there, handguns, whatever we might need. Behind the back seat, we had gun racks in the cars. We had pull-off door panels that would snap off. You could put them back on. We had handguns and stuff in there, whatever you might need. But we always had a work car ready.
So what did Wolfman do for you?
Wolfman, when I contacted him after all this went down, and this is several years later, this is when I first met Joe West, and Joe West had come here, visited me, we talked, and he asked me, he said, do you think this party called Wolfman would talk to me? And Joe asked me what his real name was, and I told him, I said, I won't divulge that, but I will call him and talk to him. So I called him on the phone, and I told him, I said, I'm talking to Joe West from Texas, and he wanted to know who Joe was, and I explained all this to him, and I said, Joe would very much like to interview. I said, I did not give Joe West your name, but I told him that you was the one that manufactured the special rounds. You made 6 rounds for me to take to Texas, all mercury loaded. I said, he wants to talk to you very much. Will you talk with him? And he said, get back to me. He said, I'll let you know. He said, I want to check a few things. The following week, Wolfman was dead.
How did he die?
I believe he had a heart attack. I've been in contact with nobody that was affiliated with Wolfman since that date.
Tell me about these mercury loads. Can you describe them for just a layperson?
Well, it was a 22 round, and he took the tips out. He drilled them out. Then he inserted with an eyedropper, put mercury into the end of the round, and he resealed them with wax. This is to make them explode on impact.
Okay. So now you've got, and describe the car.
The car was a 63 Chevy 2-door Burgundy, Chevy Impala.
With the special compartments.
Oh, we had special, yeah, we had the special compartment, the dash. We had the back seat, you could take that off, pull the bottom part out, then you raise the back up, snap it off the little clamps, take that out. We had the springs removed in behind the seat there by it. And we had little racks welded in there so we could mount weapons in there.
Okay, so now you got your weapons, you got your loads, you got your car. How did it come together after that?
Well, just before I left, final instructions was, Chuck told me, he said, I want you to leave first thing in the morning. He says, and I don't want you driving at night. He said, I want you on the highway with a lot of traffic during daytime where nobody pays any attention to you. The purpose of that was for me to go to Dallas, look over the area, learn dead-end streets, railroad crossings, time for train crossings. They already knew the regular motorcade route that he would be taking, and they had already looked that over, and they wanted to see if there's any better places, and a lot of people had already decided on. I'm not the one that chose Dealey Plaza, but I was told to look it over very close and look and see if I thought there's any other place better. And I did the whole area from the route they had. I was in Mesquite, Texas Saturday morning. Okay, but that's when Lee Harvey Oswald showed up at the motel where I was at. I arrived there on a Friday. I'm pretty sure it was Friday when I arrived there.
Did you call anybody when you got to Dallas?
I made 2 telephone calls when I got there. I called Charles Nicoletti, told him that I was on the scene and where I was at in case he had to reach me. I turned around and made another phone call. I called David Atlee Phillips. I had a number to call. The call was put through to David Phillips, and he was notified where I was at, because I had not told him in advance that I was going to Dallas, Texas.
And why did you call David Atlee Phillips?
Because he always had to know where I was at, because he was my controller.
For?
CI purposes, special operations, or something that might be needed done.
And you were supposed to stay in contact with him?
We always stayed in contact. We had numbers to call.
What happened after that?
He said, thank you, and let it go at that. We didn't have any great discussion on the phone. I told him where I was at, the location, and through David Atlee Phillips is the only way that Lee Harvey Oswald could have known where I was at. But I'd called no one else. I made 2 phone calls.
Where were you staying?
I was staying at the Lamplighter Inn right there in Mesquite, Texas.
And then the next thing you knew, Lee Harvey Oswald showed
The
up.
following morning, Lee Harvey Oswald was there. When he knocked on the door, I opened the door and I was shocked to see him, because I didn't think anybody knew where I was at except for the other 2 people.
Why is Phillips the only one who could have sent Lee Harvey Oswald?
Because Charles Nicoletti had never met Lee Harvey Oswald.
You didn't know him?
He did not know him.
You say you were shocked to see him, but did you know Lee Harvey Oswald?
I had known Lee Harvey Oswald prior to that, yes.
How'd you know him?
I knew him from earlier operation that we was on with David Phillips when I was running semi-automatic 45 caliber submachine guns down to Clinton, Louisiana. David Atlee Phillips, he introduced me to Lee Harvey Oswald. And upon doing this, he also explained to me that he was Lee Harvey Oswald's controller, the same as he was mine. That he was always in contact with Lee Harvey Oswald.
So that's how you know that that's where the word came for Oswald to come meet you in Dallas.
So that, through common sense, tells me the only one that could have sent Lee Harvey Oswald to me was David Atlee Phillips. And when I opened the door and Oswald was there, I was kind of shocked to see him, because I didn't know that he knew I was there. And so I asked Lee, I says, what the hell are you doing here? Because I was shocked, you know. He said, I was advised to drop by and spend some time with you and see if I could help you out. I said, help me out? He said, yes. He says, somebody wants me to show you the area. And I said, okay. He said, come on in. So he come on in, so we sat down and we talked, and I said, I'll be with you in a few minutes. And I was young and cocky at that time, and I'd just come out of the shower and everything, and I was combing my hair, so I had a camera there, so I told Lee, hey, make a couple of pictures while I'm here in Texas. And so Oswald made a couple of pictures of me, and then he said, let me have the film, I'll get it developed. I said, no. I said, I get the whole roll of film. So that was how I got a couple of pictures made that people have recently asked me about. But,
whose camera was it, yours or
my
his?
camera.
Your camera?
Yeah. But he was going to take the film, turn them in, and get them developed. But I said, no.
Didn't want to let that film go.
I do my own work.
How did he arrive at the motel?
He arrived driving Blue Falcon.
So did you and Lee Oswald drive around Dallas, son?
We drove around Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald and I, we drove around Dallas probably up till right before the assassination. I did not see Lee Harvey Oswald on the morning of the assassination. But prior to that, Lee Harvey Oswald had been with me every day. We drove around. He showed me different streets, different areas. He was the one that took me out to the place southeast of Mesquite there, next to a big junkyard. We went out there in the field. He said, ain't nobody going to bother you out here, you know, because I wanted to calibrate the scopes for not only for the fireball, but for other weapons as well. And while I was out there firing weapons and ejecting shell casings, Lee was picking them up and holding them in his hand. But I didn't want to leave no casings or nothing behind, and I'm busy firing, so I looked at Lee, grab them casings. And that's what he did. He picked them and he held on to them until we got ready to leave. So I calibrated my scopes, set things up, put the stuff back in the car, and we got back in. We went riding around, and I wanted to know the railroad crossings. I wanted to wait and see what time trains come through. I I want to know if there's any passengers, if there was freight trains, they stopped, the track's going to be blocked, the intersection's going to be blocked, dead-end streets, construction work, where every intersection was at, where all the lights were at, how long the lights were, they stayed red. I wanted all these little details. We was out there we were test firing weapons for approximately, I'm going to say 20, 30 minutes. But during the day, we probably spent anywhere from 5 hours, 6 hours together. He worked in the book depository stores, what he told me. I was never in that place. But he had time off to come out and spend time with me, and then I would drop him off in the area, and he would go somewhere, and I guess that's where he went. I had never asked him where he went, what he done, who he saw. I'd gotten a message that I was supposed to call Leo at the, I think it was the Dallas Cabana. And I called over there and answered the phone to Leo because Mr. Nicoletti didn't want his name used. I knew he'd come in late. I didn't know when he'd come in. I didn't know how he got there.
Then you have individuals such as Chauncey Hope, who received a letter from Peter Licavelli to come to the Grace Ranch and pick up Lips, another mob associate out of Cleveland or Detroit, and also Chucky, who was Chuck Nicoletti. Chauncey Hope stated that he drove both of these individuals to Dallas and arrived approximately late night of the 21st or early morning of the 22nd.
And we were told that we had to be in Dallas on the night of November 21st. We stopped off in Tucson at Pete Licavoli's ranch, and Charlie Nicoletti and Leo Masuri indicated that they wanted to make the drive with us, and we would all alternate in the driving so we could drive straight through. We didn't arrive in Dallas until early the following morning, on the morning of the 22nd, for the simple reason that we had some car trouble, we hit bad weather.
But when I come in, I was told to come over there and park, and that Johnny Roselli would come down. He wanted me to drive Johnny Roselli to Fort Worth. I pull up out front and waited. He come down a few minutes after I pulled up. I never went in the hotel, never asked for anybody. He come down and come outside because he knew I was en route. And I drove from there to Fort Worth, Texas with Johnny Roselli in the car. I was well aware that Johnny Roselli was involved in the government actions. He was like the liaison between CIA and organized crime, and he was heavily involved in the invasion of Cuba, Bay of Pigs, Chianos Bay, whichever you prefer to call it. But he was also very tight with Frank Sturgis. Frank Sturgis headed up the SAO, which is a secret army organization, what this is all about. And they've had so many different code names for wanting to kill Castro, I couldn't even name half of them. But every time you turned around, somebody had a new operation going. I didn't know where we were going to Fort Worth. He's told me, and he had directions, and I don't know if he'd ever been there before or not. But we went through Fort Worth. I remember the exit was, we got, well, I wasn't the exit really, it's like University Avenue or University Boulevard. It was named University, that's all I know. And I know it was on the south side, and then it stood on the west side of that street. It was just a couple blocks off, and there was a pancake house. Fairly new one.
Did you know it's still there?
No, I didn't know it was still there, but
Still there.
it's been there long. I guess they made good pancakes, I know that.
True.
But that's where I had my first Belgian waffle. But that morning when I got there, Johnny Roselli went there to meet somebody by the name of Jack Ruby. I had never knew Jack Ruby, nothing about him. When I got there and pulled into the parking lot, Johnny Roselli told me, he said, let me go in first, see where I'm going to sit, come in, position yourself. And he asked me, he said, are you carrying? And I said, yeah, I'm carrying. He says, good. He says, when I sit down where I'm sitting at, he said, I don't know what may transpire. He said, something could go wrong. He said, but be very alert. He said, keep my backside covered. He said, I won't be in your line of fire. And I said, okay, I'll pick up open field of fire. I says, wherever I figure I can handle it. I said, I'll go sit down, I'll come in position myself. Johnny Roselli went in and they had like, you'd call it a booth at the table sitting there, you know, it wasn't bolted to the floor or nothing. But he sat down in that, and I went in shortly right behind him. I positioned myself at the counter, ordered a cup of coffee, was served, and sit there. And then I sit there and I watched until short, stocky built man come in, walked over, Johnny got up, they shook hands, they sit down, they talked for a couple of minutes. I seen him take like a half size, like a legal envelope, but only half that size, out of his jacket, and he pushed it across the table to Johnny Roselli. He got up, they shook hands. This man left. Johnny waited maybe 2 minutes. Johnny looked at me. I got up. I walked out of the restaurant, made sure the area's clear, nobody outside in the parking lot. I went over, got in the car, started up. I pulled up by the door. Johnny Roselli walked out, got in the car, and we drove away.
Did you ask him, or did you find out in some way what was in the envelope?
On the way back to Dallas, Johnny and me was riding down the road. He didn't open the envelope right away. We got almost, I think it's Arlington. It's about halfway there. I'm saying halfway. It could be less one way or the other. Been a long time for me. But we was right about Arlington. And Johnny opened the envelope up, started taking stuff out and looking at it. Excuse me. He's looking at it. I'm noticing over. I'm watching over while I'm driving. And he's got these little black wallets, like half-sided, like identification wallets. And he opened them up, and there's identification plates in them, and there's badges in them. At that point, I didn't know what the identification on it was, because he's sitting there looking at it, and I'm not going to lead over. I'm not going to say, give me one of those or anything like that. I'll wait. When they want me to know, he'll tell me. And then he opened up a piece of paper and he unfolded it. And there's been a lot of discrepancy over this part now. But Johnny Roselli said they only made one change in the route. And it was a map of Dealey Plaza, the motorcade route. When he looked at it for Dealey Plaza, he said they've only made one alter, one change in it. He said, that's all. And I said, what's that? And he said, they're going to go down Elm Street. So they're going to stop and make a detour and come around this little street here. And he held it up, and I kind of glanced over at it, but I didn't get a chance to look at it real good at that point. But I already had reconned the area, so I knew what he was talking about. And I know everybody says, well, they had the motorcade in the newspaper weeks and months ahead of time. True, they did, but they didn't have that one change. And anybody wants to show somebody a newspaper clipping, they better check it real close, because the original route, they was not coming down Elm Street there on that little detour where they had to slow down.
Had you heard prior to that when they got to Dealey Plaza that they would just continue straight on down Main Street? Was that the idea?
The original plan was that we'd be shooting at a fast-moving target, and Nicoletti had no military experience, and I already had advised him that he would have to shoot high and the target would be going away from him, that he would have to shoot above the head. And we were going for a headshot, and I told him it's going to be hard for you to get from there. And we're getting a little bit ahead, though. Before we got into this part,
Let's go back.
because Chuck hadn't got to Dallas that week. He only come in, I'd seen him that morning. I hadn't seen Chuck in person until I went with Johnny Roselli to Fort Worth and come back. At that point, Roselli, he mentioned to me, Johnny Roselli, we was on the way to Fort Worth, and I asked him, he said, when did you get in? He said, I got in this morning. He said, I got in early this morning. He said, I hadn't been here a couple hours. And I said, how'd you get in? He said, I got lucky. I flew in on a MATS. I said, MATS? And for people who don't know what a MATS is, that's Military Air Transport Service. And he said he got lucky. He caught a ride on a plane that's sponsored by the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA.
In your times as a pilot, have you ever been involved or worked with the CIA?
Yes, I have.
Over a period of how many years?
Off and on, a period of 30 years.
Have you ever met in your lifetime a person named John Roselli?
Yes, I knew John Roselli rather well.
Where were you on November the 22nd, 1963?
I was observing the attempt on Kennedy's life. I was at Dealey Plaza, and Roselli boarded the flight at Tampa, Florida, and he was staying at the Congress Inn the night before he boarded the flight. Our team flew out of West Palm Beach, a place called Lantana, and to Tampa, and then Roselli and a couple other people got on board in Tampa. We flew to New Orleans, where 2 people got off, 3 other people got on. Roselli stayed on board. We flew to Houston, and then the next morning we had some weather, and then we left for Dallas.
Was Charles Nicoletti on the flight?
Charles Nicoletti was not on that flight, but Charles Nicoletti was in Dallas.
Johnny Roselli got out of the car, went back in the hotel. I waited maybe 5 to 7 minutes for Charles Nicoletti to come down. When he got down, Mr. Nicoletti got in the car with me and said, let's go. We took off. I said, where to? He said, take me over by the plaza. We went over. We parked. It's drizzling rain. We get out. We're walking around. This is the first time that Charles Nicoletti has even mentioned to me about an abort team. And he asked me.
What did he say?
While we're walking around, Charles Nicoletti asked me, he says, how do you feel about being backup? I said, what do you mean backup? He said, how would you feel about being backup as a shooter for me? I said, what happened to Johnny? What's with Johnny? And he said, Johnny's a little bit paranoid on this. He says, the CA's called the hit off. He said, they don't want the hit to go down. And I said, well, what'd you say? Chuck's exact words were, fuck them, it's going anyway. And I told him, I said, well, what about Johnny? He said, well, Johnny's good. Johnny will be with me, he says, but he's not going to be a shooter. He said, he doesn't want to go against the orders. He said, he's been told, he flew in here specifically to abort this assassination. So I asked him at that point, I said, what'd you say? He said, I said, fuck him, it's a go. He said, we're going to do it. He said, Jimmy, he says, you know we can't call this off. Only one man can stop it. He said, and he's here. If he wants us to stop it, he said, he'll notify me. He said, I'm not going on somebody else's word. He said, as poor as it is right now, I have a go, he says, from the boss. He says, we're going.
Now, who was the one man that could have stopped it?
There was only one man. Charles Nicoletti did not say his name at that point. He just said the boss. I knew he was referring to. He was referring to Sam Giancana. Sam Giancana, he was the number 2 man at that time. A lot of people's going to tell you he was number 1, but not true. Tony Accardo was still running things. He turned things over. He had Sam Giancana running all this operation and everything, but Tony Accardo was still the man, and he was still calling the shots on whatever went down, whatever was done.
So anything Giancana said had to at least have the okay of
it. Had to be sanctioned, and it had to come through Tony Accardo.
We're talking about the Chicago crime.
We're talking about only the Chicago area alone. I knew of no other crime family being involved. I heard rumors, but do I know if anybody else was involved? No, I do not know if anybody else was involved.
Okay.
They would have been out of character for them to even notify me about that or anybody else. That only stays up in the higher ranks of the family or the people or the crime family, whoever you wish to describe it. And when things are handed out, like different departments, different people get different things. Somebody might be into bookmaking. Somebody handles the bookmaking. They pass that out to one party. This party, he distributed amongst the people in the area, because everybody's got a little, what we call territory at that time. And somebody else might be into loan sharking. And you might have somebody running cardage theft. You might have somebody else running chop shops, which eventually I got into, which led to my federal prison sentence. But when it come down to murder contracts, that was a whole new thing. Then we had somebody else that handled the liquor license. But everything was distributed amongst different people. And whatever moved, including the garbage at that time. Even the garbage was controlled by the outfit. And one party, and this can all be confirmed, I believe he's still alive, he's very old now, but his name was Zucchero. He had the garbage pickup at that time there. And he was strictly informed that if he picked up another can of garbage, he would be in his next garbage truck going out to the dump. They took over his business, and then he went into the junkyard business. About 10:30 a.m., Mr. Nicoletti told me he asked me to be the backup shooter. And that was the first inkling of anything that I would ever be involved in the assassination itself. Prior to that, I was only know the area and transport weapons.
Was the weather clearing by that time?
It started to clear. It started clearing about 10:45, I believe, the best I can remember. I could be off a few minutes. I know it had been drizzling rain. It was cold. It was damp. Sun didn't come out until, after 11 a.m., I believe. But like I said, again, I could be off a few minutes on it. This is a long time ago. I told Mr. Nicoletti, I said I would be honored to back you on it. I said, anything you ask, I'll do. And so he told me, and most of this had already been prearranged beyond my knowledge, but this plaza had been selected. I didn't select it. Someone else already selected it. And he asked me where I thought it would be the best place for him. And I told him the Dow Tech building, because the Dow Tech building gave him a better shot with him taking the straight run through at a high rate of speed. And evidently, I'm quite certain that they had all this prearranged on that part of it, as that place is his location, and for him and Johnny as far as that goes, because they already had made an arrangements to be admitted into the building.
Why do you think he checked that with you then? Why did he?
Oh, he didn't check it. He just asked my opinion. He has always questioned me about different things. He used me like a sounding board. Like maybe, you're in business or in the office, you might ask one of your people around you, what do you think about this? You don't really care what he thinks. You're just asking for an opinion to see what he thinks. Maybe you overlook something, or maybe somebody's got a better idea than you do at this time of the game.
Could it also be that you had military training and experience when Nicholas?
Well, that's possible. He respected me for my knowledge of weapons, my knowledge of knowing terrain, because I'd been in combat, and the first thing you walk into an area is, I mean, to you it's a landscape. To me it's terrain. Because if I walk in and I walk into an ambush, I want to know where the low spots are, the high spots are, where all the coverage is. I got to know where I can get my rear end down so I don't get shot off. You got to have a place to go to ground in a hurry. You cannot afford to stand around and be looking around and wondering, gee, where can I go from here? You do, you're dead. You got to think. That's why you take all this training in the military. You're trained not to think, but to react.
But Mr. Nicoletti had never been in the military, had he?
Not to my knowledge. He'd never served a day in the Army or any military service as far as that goes.
Where did you serve?
I was in the Army, 82nd Airborne. I took my basic at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I took my AIT at Fort Polk. They screwed up my orders. I went to Fort Sill and laid there for about a week, maybe 10 days. From there, I went to Fort Bragg to go airborne. Mr. Nicoletti asked me, he said, if you back me up, Jimmy, he says, oh, where do you think would be the best spot for you? And I said, well, the spot I like best is up on the grassy knoll behind that stockade fence. He says, why there? I said, I got the railroad yard for cover. I said, in my clothes, I can turn my jacket inside out. I said, it's plaid on the inside. It looks like railroad workers. Somebody out there wearing a flannel shirt. Nobody's going to pay no attention to me. I said, I can go over there. I can walk around a piece of chalk, walk up and down by boxcars, cross the railroad tracks, look at things. I'd just be another worker. Nobody'd even look at me. And he said, okay. He says, what weapon are you going to use over there? And I told him, and Chuck, I said, well, what's the situation? Chuck said, you know, we're going for a headshot now. I said, this I understand. I realize this. He said, you're not going to fire unless it becomes a necessity. He says, if I miss, he said, then it's going to be up to you. He said, but you don't fire, he said, unless I miss. He said, it's going to be your call at that point. He said, so you got to be very alert on this. And I told him, don't worry about me. I said, I got it, boss. And he said, what are you going to use? I said, I'm going to use the fireball. And he looked at me and says, why? Why the fireball? Now the fireball, for people who don't know what a fireball is, it's like a cut-down rifle. It's actually basically this long. The weapon was well ahead of its time. This was one of the prototypes that the agency had got a hold of that had been manufactured by Remington. Now a lot of people are going to tell you that this particular weapon was not available at that time, but this weapon was available. It didn't go on sale till a few years later. But this weapon had been manufactured as early as 1961. We had a lot of trouble with the barrel blowing up on it, used too big a round on it or something, overloads in it. A lot of problems with it, but they finally reinforced the barrel. We got it where it worked pretty good. And Chuck asked me, he says, why the fireball? He says, you've only got one shot, because the Remington Fireball 222 is a single-shot bolt-action pistol, and you can mount a scope on it. So, well, if I'm going to wait until you're through, I said, I'm only going to get one shot anyway, so it don't really matter. I said, because I'll never get a chance for a second shot if I wait until the last possible moment. He said, okay. He said, it's your call.
Where'd you get hold of a prototype weapon like the XP-100?
It was given to me by David Phillips. I'd received this maybe a year prior, 8 months, year prior to the assassination. The gun had been used twice before on assassinations, but nobody like a president or nothing. But it was good for using. You want to get into a close place area or somewhere, somebody might say, well, why use a pistol? Well, anybody that knows their weapons, this particular piece of sub is very accurate. After I took Charles Nicoletti back to the hotel, I went back to the plaza, secured the car, got my briefcase out with a gun in it, with a fireball in it. I went into the railroad yard. I secured that over there, put it away so nobody would see it. Reversed my jacket inside out. I'd taken my hat, grape door like, and my jacket was a gray poplin. We had these car jackets back then. They were like waist length, not a short jacket, but they kind of come down a little bit. There's no car jacket like, made out of a material that they no longer use. It was called poplin. You might remember that material. The poplin material, grayish color, had a shine to it. Excuse me, that's what the jacket was like that I was wearing, a pair of gray pants with it. And I reversed the jacket and it had the offset plaids in it, like, you know, kind of like checker on the inside. When I turned it over, it looked like one of the old gray flannel shirts that we used to wear out, you know, when you was doing work in the yard or something or other. Excuse me. And I walked around the railroad yard and I was waiting for the time to pass. Time was coming on. And when I heard the roar of the crowd, I'd been over by the fence and I got there a few minutes early. I'd reach down, I'd taken the scope off the weapon, and I'd look up and I'd look over the fence and I would looking for people. What I was looking for was not to see who I knew, but I was looking for people that would be carrying a bulge like up under the arm. I'm looking for somebody with a weapon. A lot of people say Jack Ruby was never there, but he was there before the motorcade got there. I know that for a fact. And even though I didn't know Jack Ruby, but I was as close to him as I was you in the coffee shop, but I never spoke to him. I was never introduced to him. Never said a word to Jack Ruby. But I was that close. I'm looking at the back side of him, and I'm pretty sure that was him. Diaz was there. I believe his name was Tony. Tony Diaz is what I know him as. Richard Kane, he was on scene. He was in the crowd. He had been there early. He was leaving. He was walking like away. Philip Alvarez, I know he was there that day. Where he went, I have no idea. But there were several people that I saw.
How about Frank Sturgis?
Frank Sturgis, he was there.
How did you know Frank Sturgis?
I knew Frank Sturgis from the Bay of Pigs and from the SAO. I also knew Orlando Bosch. He was on scene. Orlando Bosch. I don't know if you're familiar with his name or not, but he was also present. There's a few other faces I recognized. I just don't remember the names for them because it's so long ago.
How do you figure all those people were in Dealey Plaza?
You know, I couldn't figure that one out myself, but it's like anything else. It's like everybody, they know something's going to happen. Maybe they know a building's going on fire or something. You know, you got a building burning and may collapse. Everybody runs to see the fire. They should be going the other way. About the only time I've ever seen a lot of confusion was where people were trying to get away, like if you was the racetrack or in a crowded place and somebody yelled gun, everybody broke and stampeded. And we had a few people out the racetrack get hurt that way. They're out at Maywood Park. They got hurt in a stampede like that. But basically speaking, if somebody knows something's going to happen, they have a tendency to go see it. Most people are curious. You know, you ever drive down the highway, you see a wreck? You're probably guilty of it. You slow the car down, look out the window. Everybody does it. So a lot of people come there for that reason, probably because they had heard these rumors and stuff that he was going to be assassinated in Dallas. That was no secret.
Right.
Even the National Security Agency knew that.
What about Eugene Braden?
Eugene Braden, he was there that day. He was the, Eugene Braden was there for a specific reason. He had the contacts inside the Dow Tech building. And he was the one that Charles Nicoletti and Johnny Roselli needed to get him into the private office somewhere or another. I have no idea where that office was. I was never in the Dow Tech building myself, so I can't even describe anything in there.
So you probably stood behind that fence there for some little time.
Oh, only for, I stayed away from the fence. I stayed basically in the yard, walk over the fence, look over it, spend a minute, then walk back away again. But I was observing the area.
Were you a smoker at the time?
Oh, yes, I did smoke.
Were you smoking cigarettes that morning?
I was smoking that day. Careless. I probably stepped on several cigarette butts and left them there. Most of them Pall Mall.
Was it muddy back there?
It was very muddy. Let me put it this way. I a couple of times even took my shoes, put them up on the little concrete ledge there and scraped the mud off the bottom of them. But like I say, before the motorcade ever arrived on scene and I took the scope off, I didn't have the gun up over the fence. I didn't want nobody to panic at that point. But I had a little scope up my hand and I could look over the fence and I could kind of check and see who it was. I was looking, like I say, I was looking for security people, you know, for somebody carrying, somebody packing. Because I want to know who's got weapons when I go to leave there.
That fence kind of makes an L shape, you know.
Yeah, it's on and off, yeah. It's long area to short area, but it's not exactly an L, it's on a slant, 45, like 45 degree. I was, I'm going to say 8 to 10 feet down there. There was a tree branch that hung right over me. I was behind that, kind of gave me a little camouflage.
Okay. Did you ever see an ambulance come by?
No, I never paid no attention. I wasn't watching the vehicles that passed by. I'm looking at people. I never noticed an ambulance.
You didn't see an ambulance with red lights?
No, I might have heard a siren. I don't remember. I had all that tuned out. I'm in another complete mode. Sirens, lights flashing, ambulances, police. That don't bother me. I'm not there to look for those things. I'm there looking for other details, for other things.
Okay, so then what happened? The motorcade came?
We, at this point, came down, and at that time, the motorcade was about turning, or maybe halfway between the city jail, or the county jail, and the turnoff right through there. Sergio and I came over here, looked at these light posts here, decided, okay, if we had a shooter, more than likely he would be right along in here, using the left or the right side of these posts as a reference point for timing or whatever. And then we observed the rest of what the motorcade as it came around.
The President's car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the trademark.
Motorcade come down, I believe that's Main Street there, come down on Houston, turn back around onto Elm there, and come down that little side drive there. Oh, when it come down and made its first right, that's when I brought the weapon up. And then I'm over the fence, and as they come down, made the turn on down there, that's when I started focusing through the scope and following the car.
And we noticed a lot of commotion as it started coming into view. And then the shots came out, and that's when all hell broke loose.
I've got this sign there for the Simmons Freeway that is fixing to come into my field of fire. As far as I can see at this point, the President has not been hit in the head at this time. I've seen the body lurch. I know he's been hit. How serious, I don't know. But my last instructions was we're going for headshot. If you have to take a shot, take it. But don't fire unless it's a necessity, unless you really have to. I was aiming for his right eye, which to me is the left side of his head looking head on. But for him, it would be his right eye. And once I pull the trigger, I'm right in on it, and it's almost like looking 6 feet away through the scope. As I squeezed, take off my round, his head moved forward, I missed, and I coming right along the temple, just right behind the eye. I fired one shot only.
And at this point right here, I remember seeing Kennedy's head going way back like that.
To me, what I believe is, and I did not see, let me clear the fact now, I never saw Mr. Nicoletti shoot Kennedy, but I know he was the man in the Dow Tech building, the man supposed to be doing the shooting. Therefore, the head started forward. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Nicoletti hit him at that point. As I squeezed off my round, the head started forward, I hit him and blew the head backwards.
And Sergio turned to me, he said, "Oh my gosh, we effed up. Let's get the hell out of here." And so at this point, I turned like this, and then made a step to come up and around, and Sergio was about right along here, and we went up here. There was a gentleman down here in a parked car, a truck. As we got to about this area, he hollered something to Sergio. Sergio was maybe a little bit down. He says, "It looks real bad." And then we continued to proceed up through this way, just casually walking like we were going to go back over where the crowd was congregating, going to that section right there. There was a few congregation up there at the deal. I looked back once or twice in time to see the limousine go under the triple underpass.
Something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by.
We continued on over here, and this picket fence was up, and there was a little opening right through here. And when we got to this point right here, we did smell gun smoke. And we felt that maybe that gun smoke had drifted because of the north wind across here for the time span it took us to get from the light post to this intersection right here. We definitely picked up a good solid smell of gunpowder.
So the exit wounds where in the rear?
I didn't hit the rear, the exit blew out. And you can see Jackie,
Where was the exit? On the right side or the left side?
Partially, most of it on his right side, I guess, back there where the section come right out.
In front of me, about 10 feet, I noticed something that just didn't fit in with the rest of what was on the ground. There were leaves blowing about. It was a cloudy, gray, overcast time of year, and reached down and picked it up. And at that time, knew that I had something that most likely was significant.
And what was that something?
It turned out to be a piece of human bone. A pathologist that looked at that piece of bone identified it as being a piece of the rear portion of the skull.
Well, I looked over the fence and I saw Jackie Kennedy crawling out on the back end of the car, the limo. At this point, I got to figure, well, she's going to be picking up a piece of his skull or something, because a lot of people say you can't see nothing through a scope like this. But what you're going to see is like, and I saw it, the head explode. I saw the backside come out. I seen brains or whatever you want to call it, tissue, hair, a whole thing. going everywhere, just a spray. And if anybody displeased, just go out and shoot somebody and look through a scope while you're doing it and watch.
Look at this proof.
Yeah. And
Did
one
you
other
see
thing
any-
I'd like to...
Did you see anybody splattered with blood and matter?
I don't know who was splattered. I think one of the agents, probably one of the Secret Service agents, writing on the back of the car. I am only assuming that I would say they probably got splattered because there was stuff everywhere.
Well, I saw as his head came up after that first shot that I heard, his head came up, as he got straight, it just seemed like it exploded. I didn't feel anything on me. I didn't feel anything hit me. I just went through it. It was like a big cloud of brains and blood and bone and stuff that I ran through. And I never knew anything about it until Buck Brewer, one of my old partners, said, there's something on your lip. And he pulled a piece of President's brain and his skull bone off of my lip, top lip.
But one of the other things I want to point out about Remington 222 Fireball, it's a high-velocity pistol. The round travels approximately 3,180 feet per second. Now then, for this type of weapon, there is very little recoil. Now, a lot of people say there's a lot of recoil, it's going to jump, you can't see nothing. And I've had a lot of criticism over the years over this here. So I'd like for somebody to go out to firing range somewhere, gun store, and take one of these particular types of weapons that carry a 222 round and fire. You're going to find very little recoil, especially when you're using an extended barrel weapon with a scope on it. You got the weight there to hold it down. It's not jumping and bouncing. You're not shooting a 44 or 45. The motorcade, the best of my recollection to me and my mind, and everything is slowed down at this point. When the first shot went off, it's like it stopped. It's just like it slowed down almost to crawl or barely moving, or maybe it even stopped. I'm not really sure on that point. I know I was waiting. It kept moving. It had to have been moving, but very, very slow. Because I'm waiting for it to get up the sign. I'm waiting for something to happen so I don't have to shoot. Not that I'm afraid to, but if I don't have to, I don't want to. But like I say, when the car got even almost up to that Simmons Freeway sign there, and that was one of the most, and ain't like these new ones they got today with nice little skinny metal posts and a little sign. These here had, made it, I guess, the wooden legs on, or what do you want to call it? The post, the hell, it was wood. Anyway, I had my shot. It's either I shoot now or I don't. I took my shot.
Did you ever notice if any of those rounds hit that sign?
No. I don't know if anybody else's did or not. As far as I know, their round never hit it. I know my round didn't hit it. Like I say, I fired one shot. I was on target. No. I'm watching one thing. Through that scope, I'm watching one thing. I'm watching President John F. Kennedy.
So if a bullet hit the sign, you probably wouldn't have seen it anyway.
No. I didn't even know Cumlin was hit at that point of the game.
Were you nervous in any way?
Was I nervous? No. If I'd have been nervous, I'd have been shaking. I couldn't have made the shot. Okay. A lot of people may find this hard to believe, but you've got to understand something. First time you go into the field of fire, when you go into a firefight in combat, you might be nervous or skittish. But after you've been initiated into the field of fire, whatever you want to call it, combat, firefights, a lot of people got different names for it, skirmishes, you get over it. And, and to me, and a lot of people are really going to think I'm probably sick, but when you got into a firefight, that was the ultimate high. I've never used drugs in my life. A firefight to me, being in the service, that was one of the greatest things there was. It was the ultimate high. And at this point, when you're stalking down somebody, and this particularly, they stopped me from hunting animals altogether. When I was young, I used to love to go shoot deer, rabbit, squirrel, whatever I could get, pheasant. But after you went into the jungles and you've hunted man and you've stalked a man down and you've hunted a man down on equal terms where he can kill you, you have no desire to go shoot a defenseless animal. I become to where I loved animals much more than that. I couldn't kill an animal. When my dog had to be put to sleep, my wife and one of my top right-hand men had to take the dog to the vet because I didn't have the heart to do it. Oh, as I'm walking away, I've got my briefcase, gun case in my right hand. I've got my left hand over by my coat pocket. I got a Colt 45 there. I've got it fully loaded with 6 rounds in it. It's ready to go if I need it.
When you reversed your jacket.
I've already reversed my jacket. When I picked up the gun case, I reversed my jacket, no plaid side. I got the poplin gray material on the outside. I took the fedora I had shoved down in the sleeve of it, snapped it out, put it back on my head, and I walked away. Here in the briefcase, and my 45 inside my coat pocket.
How long did it take to do it?
Just a few seconds. Don't take long.
Get your glasses out. Is that any chance that that's you walking along right there?
This would be probably 15, 30 seconds.
Looking at that, I couldn't say it's me, but I'm saying you can see somebody there, basically speaking. It could have been.
Is that the direction you took?
Yeah.
You walked back towards the depository?
Right. Going in that direction.
And there was nobody around you even at that point?
At that point, there's nobody around me. I'm not going to let nobody get close to me at that point because, like I say, somebody might try to grab me. They might want to pull a gun on me. I'm looking at people. Somebody turns around. If they make the wrong move, if I see somebody pulling a weapon, they're going to be shot. If I see somebody...
Okay, this is there's a little retaining wall, and right on the other side of it's a sidewalk, and then there's like a little, I don't know, a garden patch, little flower garden thing, and then that road, the little road that runs in front of the depository.
Right.
Is that
That's the one that comes to the dead end down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
And that's right where you were walking?
That's right where I was walking.
If you're on the south side or the north side of that
I don't
street?
remember.
Don't remember. Okay.
All I remember is I'm walking and I'm watching over my shoulder. I'm trying to see if anybody's coming at me.
Do you have the moment picture there?
Yeah. Well,
Look at that later.
I think it did. Yeah, no, we might as well look at this right here. Is that the tree you're talking about?
Yep. You can see the branches from back over here coming right down over the wall.
And that's the vicinity where you were standing?
Right there.
You know, in this picture there is an object visible if you blow it up, right here next to that tree. And if you blow it up, it may look like a hat or a fedora.
Do you remember which side of the tree you were on? Was it to your left or your right?
I could be mistaken. I believe that, no, the tree was to my right. It had to be to the right. The tree was to my right. 'Cause I didn't want to have the tree in the way of my left.
That's correct. Or
You can't see the sign here, but the sign is right on down here.
yeah, the sign. Yeah. This is the blow up. This is sky. This is sky, and this is the shape. You know. Do you see a hat in here?
Do I see what?
A hat.
Not to me. You're asking the wrong... I got a hard time seeing with these glasses, believe me.
So as you walked past, did you just walk straight to the car?
I went straight to the car. I didn't bother pay no attention to nobody. I went right to the car. What was going on around me, I don't know. I can't tell you what passed me. I can't tell you who was looking at me, and I can't tell you how many people was around. I had one thing on my mind. Anybody that approaching me with the determination to stop me, to question me, detain me, whatever you want to call it, or anything else. All I want to do now is reach my destination, which is the car, put the case in the back seat there on the floor, like I chugging me already have figured out. I'm going to get in the car, start it up, drive away.
Was the car empty when you got there?
No, sir. When I got to the car, Charles Nicoletti was in the front seat, Johnny Roselli was in the back seat.
And
There's only 2 seats in the front. We had the bucket seats in it.
so as soon as you got in the car, you just started up?
As soon as I got in the car, opened the door, set the case in the back, behind the front seat, got right in the car, lit the ignition, and gone.
Anybody say anything at that point?
Nobody said nothing to me. At that point, we pulled out, and as we went down the street heading for the intersection, the only thing that was said to me was, Mr. Nicoletti asked me, he says, Jimmy, don't you think you overreacted? I says, what do you mean? He said, do you think you fired too fast? And I told him, I said, I was fixing to lose my field of fire. Either I shoot then or I put it in a brief, put it in my gun case and I leave. I said, I had one choice. I said, at this point, you told me we were going for a headshot. There's been no headshot. I said, I'm just following my orders. I said, I didn't want to explain to you why I didn't shoot.
Did he say anything to that?
And that was the end of it. And he told me, he said, at this intersection, he says, make a left and pull up at the gas station. We get down there, he says, we're getting out, we're getting in another car there. And I said, okay. I pulled out, parked, they got out of the car. He said, I'll see you in Chicago. And that was the only thing that was said.
Did you take that as criticism?
I took it as criticism, naturally.
Did he criticize you very often?
No. The only thing was he asked me if I thought I overreacted.
You told him no, and he accepted.
He accepted it. And then I'm over the fence, and as they come down, made the turn on down there, that's when I started focusing through the scope and following the car. As shots started ringing out, I started counting the shots, but I'm not counting like 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm counting them miss, 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 because I know we're going for the headshot. So I don't care how many rounds are being fired as long as we get a headshot. But I'm hearing the shots being fired, and I'm counting them as a miss, miss. And that's the only thing I'm concerned about. I've got this sign there for the Simmons Freeway that is fixing to come into my field of fire. As far as I can see at this point, the President has not been hit in the head at this time. I've seen the body lurch. I know he's been hit. How serious, I don't know. But my last instructions was we're going for a headshot. If you have to take a shot, take it. But don't fire unless it's a necessity, unless you really have to. He said, Jimmy, don't fire unless you have to. We want everything from the backside. I'm not asking why. Okay, whatever you say. At this point, as it starts to approach and come behind that freeway sign, and I've already been instructed not to hit anybody but Kennedy because they didn't want Jackie getting hurt or anybody else, I'm fixing to lose my field of fire. And at this point, either I shoot or I can put it in a suitcase and leave, one or the other. I took the shot. I fired one shot only. And I knelt back down to the briefcase. I ejected the one casing in there. I picked up another live round, put it in, and closed the bowl on it. I took this shell casing as it come out to the briefcase. I put it in my mouth, tasted the sulfur from it. Love the taste of sulfur, by the way. Closed the briefcase up, and as I stood up, I did something I shouldn't have done, but I did do it. I took the shell casing, I bit down on it. I took it out and I looked at it, and I set it on the stockade fence. And there was an indentation from my teeth on the shell casing, on the ridge, by the orifice. And I left it sitting on the stockade fence there. And I walked away. Well, you got to understand, when you're young, you're cocky, everything is indestructible to you, you know. Nothing can go wrong. And you got to be a strong believer in all that. I mean, you know, you're infallible. And I did that because we did a few other jobs, and we did some. I might put a quarter on the forehead, and we put them in the ground. You know, we might bury them somewhere. Lay a quarter on the head. Two-bit gambler. Might put a dime and a nickel in each eye socket, a nickel in one eye, dime in the other one. You know, nickel and dime thief, stuff like that.
Was kind of your calling card?
More, you might say that. Chuck, Mr. Nicoletti would laugh at me when I do things like that, and hey, you know, we got to let them know what they got here for, you know. To me, it was a symbol. You say calling card, trait, whatever you want to do. He used to laugh at me over it, and he told me, Jimmy, just you do the job, you do it, and forget about it.
Would Mr. Nicoletti have been okay with you doing this in the plaza?
Oh, if he would have known I did that in the Dealey Plaza, right now he's probably turning over in his grave for me doing something that stupid.
Right.
But Mr. Nicoletti criticized me one other time. Matter of fact, one time, I won't get into the details, but we had somebody in the trunk, and I stopped and bought a canary because this guy was a real snitch. And I come out of the dime store with a canary, I broke its neck because I wanted to leave the canary in the guy's mouth. And he gave me firm instructions, don't you ever do anything like that again when we've got something in the trunk.
Really?
You know, it's highly uncalled for in reality.
This shell casing, by the way, was found not in the exact spot where you left it, a little bit further at the other side of the fence.
Well, I look at it this way. Whoever was searching, somebody up there looking, anybody could have looked at it, they could have thrown it over there, somebody could have stepped on it. Maybe somebody didn't want it found, who knows? They didn't want to carry anything away from there in case they got stopped. Maybe they just stepped on it, buried it in the ground. I don't really know. I know where I put it. That's all I know.
A Texas man named John Rademacher and his son discovered this .222 caliber shell casing on the grassy knoll in 1987.
That was the only .222 round. Like I said, I had a total of 6 rounds. Okay? I got 6 rounds for the Remington Fireball. I have no empty casings there. The other casings that I brought down with that, I had 6 special loads. But the rounds that I fired were standard rounds, and I had no empty casings with me. Those were disposed of out by Mesquite. I didn't leave them where I test fired them. I picked them up and got rid of them later. I made sure they couldn't be found, because I didn't want anybody to match anything up to the weapon. But with the Fireball, there's no way they're going to match a ballistics for the simple reason the shell fragmentates. But you've still got the firing pin that's going to strike the primer on the end of the shell casing. So, and a lot of times, if you've got a weapon where you can match ballistics on, you want to melt the barrel down if you've used it and some kind of a job like that or whatever, like, you know, local hit or something. Also, you want to take out the firing pin, because you don't want that discovered either to match up with the primer.
Because they can match them.
Yes, they can.
Do you have any idea about the possibility of other hit teams in the plaza that
They've, I've heard different stories about different teams there, different people shooting, and this and that. To my knowledge, and to my knowledge only, I never knew of another hit team that was in the area for Kennedy that day. If there's another team there, I have no knowledge of it whatsoever.
But it could be.
Anything is possible. Anything's possible. There could have been another team there, but what I'm stating is this. As far as I know, from what I was involved in, Charles Nicoletti, Johnny Roselli was with him, because Johnny Roselli was like his lookout, whatever, pick up any shell casing that he ejects from the rifle. We don't want to leave shell casings on the floor. Mr. Nicoletti didn't want to be running around looking behind chairs or desks. Where's the casing? Where's the casing? You got somebody there picking them up as they come out. And like I say, I never saw Charles Nicoletti pull the trigger. But he was the shooter, from what I understand, with him.
Do you think Lee Harvey Oswald fired any shots that day?
Lee Harvey Oswald never fired a shot. And if anybody knows what a paraffin test is, and we have actual court documents on where Lee Harvey Oswald was given a paraffin test by the Dallas Police Department, and on this document it plainly states, deceased J.D. Tibbet, deceased John F. Kennedy, suspect Lee Harvey Oswald. And they took a paraffin test, his face, his hand, his arm, I guess the side of his neck, and the only trace of any nitrates from powder burns or powder sufficiency was in the palm of his hand. And anybody that goes to a firing range as far as weapons knows if you fire a .38 revolver or any type of revolver, the blow by it is going to come back across this part of your hand and your wrist. The only reason he had those nitrates in the palm of his hand is he was holding spent shell casings when I calibrated the scope. There were still traces of that. But Lee Harvey Oswald, it's like I say, that's a court document. And I don't believe anybody rigged that one up.
If I am believed, it would lay to rest these ideas that Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald were just nuts that passed in the night. And that I always felt a sympathy for Oswald. And I just don't feel it's right that he would be, or his children, should be stuck with that stigmatism, that's all.
As I pulled out from the intersection, I made a left-hand turn at the intersection. I went down by the gas station. When I pulled up at the gas station to let them out of the car, let them out of the Chevy I'm in. And I'm in 63 Chevy, burgundy Chevy, we'll get that fact straight. Not a red one, or anything, it's just burgundy. That's the color of the car. They opened the door, they exited. As Mr. Nicoletti exited the car, just as he closed the door, he said, "Jimmy, I'll see you in Chicago." Told him, "Okay, boss." He closed the door. They walked across the side, like to go into the park, into the gas station there. There are several cars parked over there. I have no idea, no knowledge which particular car they went to. I did not wait to see. I pulled out, made a right one on down, got up on the highway. I went back to Mesquite. I went back to my motel. I don't want to be riding around with a carload of weapons and somebody's just been hit. It'd be highly unpractical. I went back to the hotel, pulled in. I parked my car right in front of my room where I could watch it. I got out of the car, I went into my room. When I got in the room, Zita went in, sat down, relaxed, got a drink of water, stripped all my clothes off, went in, took me a shower. Come out of the shower, I took some wax that I brought along for this particular purpose. And if anybody wants to try this, it can be pretty painful. But I knew that I would have redstone on me here and on the side of my face from firing the weapon and across my hand and wrist. Took hot wax and I poured it on myself and let it cool so it cut into the pores on the side of my face. And after a few minutes, I peeled it off, which would remove all the nitrates from any gunpowder. I went back into the shower and showered again, then showered, finished up with a good cold one because it felt like I was kind of on fire and burning. When I got out of the shower, dried off, then I put a lotion over everything to cool the burning sensation, and then I got dressed. I sit there relaxed, watched a little TV, took a nap. I waited for dusk to come. Once it got dark, I went out to the car. Nobody was around. Make sure everybody was inside doing whatever they're doing in their motel rooms. Opened the trunk up. I took the weapon out of the trunk. And when I'd gotten out of the car earlier, I'd taken the briefcase, the gun case with my fireball in it. I'd already taken that into the hotel. I went inside, had one weapon I took in, cleaned it, got it ready to put back in the car. I waited till after midnight. I went back out to the vehicle, got in, pulled the back seat out, took the top part off the back, put the gun back in the rack, the rifle. I secured my fireball with the gun case in there, Closed everything back up and went back in the hotel. I went to sleep. I got up the next morning at the first light, went down the road. There is a restaurant down the road. They're a little ways off on the right-hand side as you're coming back east. Restaurant, coffee shop not too far from there, maybe a mile and a half down the road, something like that anyway, best I can remember. I stopped there, had me some coffee, breakfast, got in the car and I left. I drove back to the southern part of Illinois. When I got to the southern part of Illinois, it was starting to get dusk, getting late. Pulled off at a motel there. As you got back in Illinois, I can't remember the name of it. I remember it was like a blue and white one. I want to say Southern something another, like a truck stop, a lot of trucks there. I went in, got a room, and I stayed overnight there. The next morning, I went out, got in the car, proceeded to Chicago.
Are you a drinking man?
At that time, I was.
Yeah. Did you have any drinks while you were in Dallas? That during the week beforehand?
I drank no alcohol. I'm working. Mr. Nicoletti would frown on that very, very much. I was down there running around drinking and cabareting.
Well, can you tell me about the death of J.D. Tippit?
When it comes to J.D. Tippit, they say that Lee Harvey Oswald was the one that shot him. It's not true. The party that shot J.D. Tippit was someone else that had been brought in. I'm not sure where he came from. I didn't even know this party was on location. But after that, I'm already back at the hotel. When the party comes up, somebody knocks on my door. I picked up my .45, walked over the door, pulled a little curtain back. I kind of look out the door to see who's there. And I see this party standing there that I recognize, that I know. And I open the door and my neighbor says, "What the hell are you doing here?" He said, "I had to stop by, I got a problem." I said, "You got a problem?" And I'm looking at him, you know. I'm still trying to register. How does he even know I'm here? Nobody knows I'm here, you know. This is getting to be a habit, like everybody knows Jimmy's in town. And he said, I had to burn a cop. And I said, "Well, you done what you had to do." He said, "I missed Oswald." And I said, "Well, what are you doing here? You burn a cop." He said, "You going to take this and get rid of it?" I said, "Hell no, that's yours. You take and get rid of it. You just shot a cop. I don't want his weapon. Don't you get rid of it. That's yours. Don't get out of here. Go."
What are you talking about?
Pardon me?
What are you talking about? The gun?
I'm talking about the gun that he had. It was a revolver. And he said, "Here, I had to burn a cop." I told him, you did what you got to do. I don't want that thing. Get away from it. Get out of here. Go where you got to go.
Kind of dangerous, wasn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, you're kind of laying low, and then this guy.
Yeah, somebody knocks on my door at this point. I'm ready to start shooting again. And he said, "Okay," and he said something another. I don't know exactly what it was. And he went out. He got in his vehicle. And he took off. I don't even know what he was driving, because as soon as he walked out that door, I closed the door and pulled the curtain back. Yeah, I don't want to know anybody. I don't want to know anything whatsoever at this stage of the game.
You're not naming this party.
No, I'm not naming this party.
What is the reason for that?
What is the reason for it? Well, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but late as 1991, when I caught this case, I know for a fact the party was still alive and in good health. Okay? But, it has, he didn't shoot Kennedy, he shot a cop. Everybody wants a cop killer, okay? But this guy's gone, I don't know who he is. I mean, I know who he is, but I'm not going to tell nobody who he is. He's gone. That's out of there. I have no idea where he's at. I don't want to know where he's at. Well, when it comes to giving somebody up, I've never given up anybody in my life. I'm not going to put anybody in prison. And as a matter of fact, you probably couldn't get the FBI to admit to it, but when a couple of their people forced their way into Stateville, I was offered all kind of deals and all kind of agreements if I would not give an interview on John F. Kennedy before.
2 FBI agents came to my facility at Stateville without me knowing, is reference to a conversation I had with James File where he mentioned in passing that he was going to have problems with his appeal because 2 FBI agents had threatened him about his willingness to speak openly about the JFK assassination, and that that could cause him problems in his appeal. Well, I really didn't think much about it at the time, except for the fact that a light bulb went on above my head and said, "Well, wait a minute, what FBI agents?" And he said, and he swore up and down there were FBI agents that came to visit him. Well, I thought I finally, I got him now. I've got him in a lie. Because I would have been the first to know, or the second after the gatehouse officer. I should have been the second to know that there were FBI agents at my gatehouse, let alone inside my facility. Come to find out that, yeah, in fact, they interviewed him. How did I find out? Well, while I was researching the possibility of FBI agents entering my facility without me knowing, I got a call from one of them. who admitted to me, yeah, he came to see files on such and such a date. So I backtracked it and found the entry finally in the gatehouse, where they had, in fact, come in and interviewed James Files. And there was a case where, unbeknownst to James, I was researching. I wanted to catch him so badly. I wanted to catch him in a lie, and he was telling the truth.
You know, this is Kennedy we're talking about. You know, to me, I never liked Kennedy. I don't even know why I ever did it. I don't even know why the FBI gave Joe West the lead on me. I've never understood that one.
But the Tippit killing is related to the murder of Kennedy.
No, the Tippit killing is not related to the murder of Kennedy, if you want to get right down to it. The Tippit killing is related to Oswald. The party that killed J.D. Tippit, they wasn't there to kill J.D. Tippit. They had parked a little ways from Oswald's boarding house. They went down there to kill Oswald. They wanted to kill Oswald. They didn't want to make a big spectacle out of it. They wanted to silence him at that point of the game, before anybody can get to him. But I guess, I don't know if Lee got spooked or whatever it was, but then he went to the theater. And he knew where he was going when he left there, because he was supposed to meet the controller there, which is David Atlee Phillips. He was the one that's supposed to be at the theater. At this point of the game, only two people know where I'm at: Charles Nicoletti and David Phillips. Lee Harvey Oswald shows up at my hotel. This tells me automatically David Phillips is in on it. David Phillips knows what's going down. So otherwise, Oswald would never be there.
So Oswald was working for the agency. In
Oswald was CIA. All the way, Oswald was CIA before I ever even knew any of these people. Oswald was recruited when he was in the Marine Corps. Well, when Kennedy come down to Dallas, we had one concern. We figured the limo might have a bubble top, you know, because it never went anywhere without it. And if it's raining, the only thing is, we was told in advance, if the top is on, it's a walk away. You know, you board it, you leave it. We'll pick another place, we'll try again. And that would have probably fallen to someone else. But the thing was, they had been instructed they were going to work on his ego. They tried to make Kennedy believe he shouldn't go to Texas, that he should be afraid of Texas. And they worked on his ego, said, you got to use the bubble top, you have to have the top on, you can't sit in an open car, you got to let these, whatever they think, you got to let them think, you know, you're afraid of whatever, but there's a high risk here. You got to have the top on. The more they worked on Kennedy about this, the more he wanted the top off. Kennedy wanted to prove, I'm not scared of anything, I want the top off, I want to wave to the people, I want to see the people, I want to touch the people. So they played on his ego. The top was off. But if the top would have been on, I would have already been on my way back to Mesquite, and I'm quite certain that Mr. Nicoletti and Roselli would have been on their way somewhere else. But when you plan something, all you can do is hope for the best. Like a football, you know, you got to make the play. Seconds are running out. You go for the long one. If it works, it works. It don't, it don't. You walk away.
Do you have any proof of what you've told us in regards to the Kennedy assassination?
When it gets down to this part about, a lot of people ask a lot of different questions about things. The one thing that I could verify right now, which cannot be made public, is the ledger, diary, ledger, whichever you prefer to call it, is a book with some papers and things that Charles Nicoletti gave to me before he was killed. Things got pretty active here. Sam Giancana was the first one to be killed, and that was in '75. And I'm not sure, maybe September. It was 75. Go there. He was killed. And the night he was killed, Johnny Roselli was in town. But I saw Johnny Roselli at the airport. And when Johnny Roselli come in, we didn't talk or anything. I was there to pick somebody else up that come in on that flight just by coincidence. And I was picking up a party that I did a lot of work for, collecting money and things. But anyway, I seen Johnny. We just nodded at each other. He had another man with him. When they left, we was right behind them. They got in their vehicle outside, we took off. We went down the road. We went down River Road, proceeding south. And the kid with me said, the only place Johnny could be going would be going over to see Sam. And Johnny went on. I went my way, Johnny Roselli went his. Johnny Roselli, the next morning I woke up, Sam Giancana had been executed, gangland style. When he was killed, bells went off of me. Johnny Roselli had to be the one to do it, because he was there. I know he went to Sam's house that night. The following year, Johnny Roselli was killed. When Johnny Roselli was killed, the party, figures the same guy that he probably dropped off. There was two people killed down there in Tampa, St. Pete, there in that area. That was got rid of at the same time. One was Johnny Roselli. The other one, another party unknown, whoever it was. I don't remember the name of him now, but evidently it was a friend of his that had traveled to Chicago with him. I figured he knew something, and somebody took him out too, because they knew that Johnny Roselli, what he had done, okay? This guy, he might have told this guy knew, they got rid of him. And when it comes down to it, the crime family did not have Sam Giancana killed. I don't know who killed him except for Johnny Roselli there, but I believe that the government ordered the contract killing on Sam Giancana. I believe the government is the one that killed Johnny Roselli to shut him up so he couldn't talk.
All of this was about the time of the House Select Committee on Assassination?
All of it, yes.
So
The following
you
year.
think that was the tie-in?
Pardon me?
Roselli,
Definitely.
Giancana?
But anybody that knew Sam Giancana, they knew Sam Giancana would have never talked. He'd have went to jail. He'd have kept his mouth shut. He would not talk. And then in April, was it April 19th or April? January, February, no, March 29th. This is the night that Charles Nicoletti was killed. And he was supposed to go testify before some committee. And he was killed at the Golden Horns right there in Melrose Park there on North Avenue and Manheim Road, the Golden Horns restaurant. And I thought at first maybe somebody in the family had hit him because we knew there was trouble. And right before his death, he'd given me this package and told me, he said, this is my life insurance. He said, if I need it, I want you to have it, you can always get to it. He said, and if anything happens to me, he says, you might need it someday. So what he gave me was, I took it and I went out and got me some cheesecloth. I wrapped the little package up and I put it in a little metal box. I went out and I dug a hole and I buried it. Put it away and covered it all up. And they never got the ledger. It's still missing. Not missing, I know where it is. And let me clarify one thing. Nobody in the world knows where that is but me. It's right here. Nobody else can ever take them to it.
Still your insurance policy.
It's still it. And if I die, all those secrets in that book go to my grave with
now,
me.
What's all in that little package? There's a little box,
It's
right?
a little box, little package inside cheesecloth, inside a metal box.
What's in there?
What is in there? In this side, this here, this ledger, what they want. I got a few other things in there, but what they want is this ledger, because it's got just about basically every murder that was carried out in the Chicagoland area. It's got dates, it's got names, figures of money, different things, reasons why, people who ordered it.
Anything in there about the JFK hit?
You got, there's a couple little lines in there. It's got JFK down, it's got the date on it. Basically, that's it.
Anything else in there that concerns the assassination?
No, just that. Just the date and the name and everything, but it's all in Chuck's own handwriting.
Okay.
What Chuck originally gave you, was it only the diary, the ledger?
No, what he gave me, what was in the package was I disposed of a lot of it, like Secret Service identification. I didn't need that. I disposed of the little map, the last minute change, that was irrelevant. I burned all that stuff. I've got rid of all that. The only thing I kept was the ledger. The ledger pertained basically to the contracts from around town, local people, people that was paid, people that was hit, the dates, when it happened, and sometimes the reason why.
Well, why would the FBI care about all that?
Oh, they'd love that because they could put a lot of people in jail.
And they could clear a lot of cases.
Oh, they could have cleared a lot of cases. They could close the door on a lot of murder cases. I'm going to say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 60 contract killings in Chicago over the years there.
Why did you burn the motorcade route?
I didn't need it. It wasn't important to me. What's it good for? That was only another admission to a part of a murder.
Evidence.
Charles Nicoletti is dead. At this point, the only thing I'm going to hold is that ledger. Like he said, that ledger is everything. Diary, ledger, whatever you want to call it. But everything else I disposed of. I had no need for it. Everybody was always ahead of my wife and my kids. Wrong. I know that. I know that now. I've got probably a lot of regrets, maybe some remorse for a lot of the things that I did do. I'm sorry at times I wasn't there to see my kids go to their little school plays or do their dances, recitals, or whatever. I'm sorry I wasn't there for their birthdays, for a lot of their Christmases. But those things are part of my life growing up. These are things that I accepted because to me, other things were more important. My family, my wife, my kids, they were way down on the list of priorities. Wrong, I know.
Are you remorseful about shooting Kennedy?
For many years, no, I wasn't. But as the time goes by, I'm not saying remorseful for shooting Kennedy. Maybe I'm more remorseful for how it affected this country and for the things it's done. Maybe John F. Kennedy did do some good things for this country. I'm not really sure. But I got a lot of remorse for a lot of things that I've done. But that's for the simple reason I've got my life turned around a little bit. So I can't be as hard as I used to be. I try to have a lot of compassion for my fellow man. But for John F. Kennedy, got to be honest, yeah, let's say I got a little remorse there for him because not specifically maybe him, but like for his family, for the kids and all. But at the time when we acted, I felt that I was right in what we were doing.
I looked him in the face and said, Jane, if what you're saying is true, do you realize that you changed history? What was the thing on your mind? What was the utmost #1 thing on your mind after you fired that shot? You know what his answer was? He goes to me, Warden, I was kind of pissed because I missed my target by a fraction of an inch. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He answered my question with a lot less emotion and passion than I asked it, which struck me.
And Files in prison now, I think, is really an unfortunate fact because he was blamed for the shooting of a policeman named David Ostertag. As a matter of fact, Files did not shoot. It was his partner named Morley that shot. And it did not kill the 2 policemen that were after them. It injured them. However, Files thought that nearly everyone in the jury of Lake County had a relative on the Lake County police force, and he got life imprisonment. And so here he is in prison, although he did not shoot because his gun jammed. So he was blamed for the shooting of David Ostertag, and he's in prison.
An example of evidence pointing towards conspiracy is the account of Lieutenant Colonel Marvin, who claims he was asked by the CIA to kill Navy officer Bruce William Pitzer. Mr. Pitzer was present at Kennedy's autopsy and responsible for making films. There is evidence that Pitzer kept copies for himself, which he refused to release.
First of all, I was called up to Colonel C.W. Patton's office. He was my commanding officer of the 6th Special Forces Group. And I went up and he said, there's a company man waiting to meet you out under the pines. And there was one other officer there too. So we both walked towards the CIA officer from Colonel Patton's office. And when we got so close to him, I went ahead and the other fellow stayed back. And he had with him a piece of paper and he handed it to me and had a name on it, William Bruce Pitzer. And he said, this man has got secrets that he's going to give to the enemy, and we'd like to have him taken care of. Would you like to do it? And I said, certainly. And I said, well, where is he located? Because I was on orders to go to Vietnam, so I assumed it was someplace outside the United States, because that's what we were told we'd do. And he said it was in Bethesda Naval Hospital, Bethesda, Maryland. And I said, I can't do that. I said, I got a wife and 3 children. I can't just all of a sudden disappear here in the United States like I'd have to in order for me to take care of that mission. And he said, you mean you refused to do it? And I said, yes. But I said, you understand why? I said, you know what we were taught. And so he just dismissed me.
However, a year later, Pitzer was found in his office with a bullet in his head, and his death was quickly ruled a suicide.
Then, in 1993, they had a 30-year anniversary of JFK's assassination special. I was watching that program, and at the end of the program, they rolled a list of 42 names of men who had been involved one way or another in the assassination or its aftermath. And one of the names was Lieutenant Commander William Bruce Pitzer, and I about fell out of my chair. I got goosebumps all over me. And I said, he wasn't selling secrets to the enemy, he was doing something else. So I immediately set about, and with the help of a friend of mine, I located his widow, who still lived in Maryland. And I talked to her on the phone twice, recorded both times, and told her that I'd been asked to kill her husband and why. And she told me that he had the actual photographs of the Kennedy autopsy, both film and slides, and that she had been told by 4 different Navy intelligence officers to not talk to anybody, not even family, about her husband's death.
The most shocking and disappointing aspect of the case was the lack of thoroughness and completeness of what the Warren Commission had done. It's mandated to tell the truth to the American people. When our government investigates, I cherish our government. I'm a believer in our system, and I've spent my career supporting our system. And as someone who served in the government, both as an assistant district attorney and as a mayor of a city and a city council, it's incumbent upon representatives of the people to tell the people the truth. And the Warren Commission didn't do that, and that to me is terribly regrettable.
Once they arrived at the conclusion, and that was done already the day of the death, the day of the autopsy, that Lee Harvey Oswald was a sole assassin, then everything had to fit. That all the shots had to come from back to front, from right to left, and from up downward. And no matter what they had found, it was going to be squeezed in. That's what gave birth to the single bullet theory, which has been attributed primarily to Arlen Specter, now U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, but which was then seized upon by everybody because they had to grab, as a drowning man floundering in a sea with tempestuous storms, they've got to grab at something to survive. They already had everything in place. How could they put this together? Well, they come up with the theory that the bullet that hit John Kennedy in the back, at its now new upward revised location, coursed through his upper chest, base of the neck area, emerged from the level of the knot of the tie, which is where the hole was that the pathologist had missed on the night of the autopsy, and then re-entered John Connolly's back, pierced his right lung, fractured the right fifth rib, destroying 4 inches of that bone, exited from the front of John Connolly's right chest, re-entered the back of John Connolly's right wrist, led to a comminuted or shattered fracture of the distal end of the radius, a very dense, heavy bone in a 6'4" guy like John Connolly, severed almost completely the radial nerve, which is the nerve that permits the thumb to hold something in that position with the fingers, exited from the front of the governor's right wrist, re-entered the governor's left thigh, went down, struck the femur, the large bone from the hip to the knee, bounced back out, came out through the same small hole, a 1/4 of an inch or so in diameter in the skin, and then from his clothing onto a stretcher. And you see, that is the single bullet theory. That stretcher bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, that we critics referred to as the magic bullet, that is the hero of the Warren Commission report. That is the sine qua non. That is the linchpin, the keystone. Without the single bullet theory, you cannot have a sole assassin. My favorite picture of all the pictures, and it's one for which I take no credit, but it's the one that if I had to give up every single thing, including the Zapruder film, this is the one thing that I would hold on to that totally destroys them, and that is the pictures. It's a composite which they made, and to this day, I bet you they'd give anything not to have made that composite. It shows sample bullets fired into cotton wadding. It shows a sample bullet fired through a goat carcass breaking 1 rib, and it shows a sample bullet fired through a human cadaver breaking a radius. They have no bullets that broke both bones, as they claim the single bullet 399 did. Well, when you look at the composite, the ball game's over. Let's go home. The case is over. Close up shop. The judge has just dismissed the case because the prosecution is giving us this evidence that shows that it can't be done. There is the stretcher bullet in all of its pristine grandeur. The bullets fired into cotton wadding have just as much deformity at the base. That's just from firing. A bullet fired through a goat carcass rib shows significant deformity, and a bullet fired through the radius of a human cadaver, forget about it. They have mushrooming, peeling back effect. In fact, some of the bullets fragmented. They, don't forget, they took the bullets that in their minds and eyes were the least damaged. And that is their experiment, which shows that it can't be done.
Here are bullet fragments taken from Governor Connolly's body during the surgery following the assassination. It is interesting to note that there are more fragments here than missing from the Commission's bullet. As can be seen in this X-ray of Governor Connolly's broken wrist, there were more metal fragments still in his body than are missing from the slug the Commission claimed caused the wound.
Well, only a person with an IQ of 40 or less could believe anything that's in the Warren Commission report.
And they've tried so hard to hide the real facts behind it, too, that I think right now the count has gone up to 102 people have had one kind of mysterious death or another that were related to trying to get out the truth about the Kennedy assassination, including the man I was asked to kill.
After reviewing all this information, I must admit that I tried to hold myself independent of my emotions. I counseled Zach to do the same. But it is difficult to so insulate yourself that the humanity within me and within Zach are hurt. I'm hurt. I'm hurt for the men and women that I know that dedicated their lives to this investigation. And it's a difficult thing to mentally deal with. But I can only see the solution for all of us is, and I'm talking about the agents in the FBI, is the truth, the facts. Yeah, I think the state of Texas, perhaps the Attorney General, should impanel a grand jury with all the legal power and authority of a grand jury to at least satisfy their legal jurisdiction of a murder case. This grand jury should have the authority to go after whatever information is necessary to gather, whatever witnesses need to be interviewed, and charge whatever people, regardless of their station in life, with violations of any crimes that may or may not have been, that may have been committed, and that basically let the chips fly where they may.
In my work on this case, I have been in contact with my fellow FBI agents, CIA operatives, known organized crime figures, and credible JFK assassination researchers. I have come to understand the full implications of how the Kennedy assassination still affects America today. I feel a profound sense of betrayal by my government, for which I worked for 28 years. The news media, and my former boss, J. Edgar Hoover. I challenge you, my fellow Americans, to demand truth and justice from our government. You owe it to yourselves. You owe it to me. And you owe it to John F. Kennedy.
I'm ready whenever you are. I'm in the autumn of my life, and I'm no longer a naive nor young man. I must admit that I saw great, great people within the FBI who dedicated their lives, who dedicated time away from their families, to the point some of us never saw our children grow up. I feel that many men and women of this country during a very severe period of our history gave lives so that we would have a quality of life today that we enjoy. I do not want that dedication to have been in vain. I'm sorry.